Ah, the great outdoors. Something gamers are actually quite familiar with. But who needs the real thing, the fresh air, the sun? We have overpriced graphics cards, folks. We could be doing a healthy activity, or we could simulate it. Well, ish. That's what games are built for, right? Something like that. Hi, folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, 20 games that let you enjoy the wilderness. Starting off with number 20, Sons of the Forest. It's right there on the tin. Who doesn't like a nice long virtual walk through the forest? With this forest, though, you don't have to, get through work or school or whatever, pack up a bunch of hiking gear, drive 2 hours out to the middle of nowhere, and enjoy nature for 20 minutes before you get tired and hungry, and it's dark now, so you're liable to get hunted by relentless, the Gray-style wolves. Honestly, on normal, Sons of the Forest isn't a lot better. Everything on the island wants you dead, from the cannibals to the mutant cannibals to the super mutant cannibals. It's a violent and dangerous place. But at least you don't have to pack to go there, right? That's the benefit. Also, you can't really die. The wolves could kill you, but the super mutants are not real. And on top of it, it has some of the most beautiful wilderness I have seen in a survival, nay, any game. The forests are just so dense and uneven. The developers just did such an excellent job avoiding all the usual video game pitfalls of a forest. Most of the time, they're too sparse compared to the real thing. This forest looks fantastic. And the way the light streams in between the branches makes an almost ethereal place that's a joy to wander around in. Other than the mutant thing, and the desecrated bodies and the mutilated shrines made of human skin. If you could get past that, there's some really pretty stuff in this game. Like, turn on peaceful mode, right? It's a nice forest. The suns are there, though. That's the problem. And number 19 is Kingdom Come Deliverance. I just don't want to stick with survival games on this list. It'd get pretty repetitive, and, well, some of the games of the best wilderness have no survival elements at all. Kingdom Come is a first-person RPG set in a relatively small open world, but it makes up for the size with this incredible attention to detail. It's one of the most realistic RPGs out right now, at least as far as the map is concerned. They put a ton of work into making this place feel just real in a way most games don't really bother with. There's some cozy as hell looking countryside in this game, and it's empty enough to actually look like a real place compared to a lot of RPGs where they just fill up the map with points of interest all equidistant from one another. It's a world that isn't filled with rewards to collect, but just walking around feels like being transported back to Bohemian 1403. Not that I know what that feels like. I feel like that's what it feels like, though, okay? The forests are just super impressive here. They're dense, they're full of tall grass and fallen logs and trees of all shapes and sizes. They put a ton of effort into making this countryside as detailed as anything else in the game. And unlike a lot of other RPGs, you don't get jumped by wild animals and bandits every 3 steps. So if you really want to treat Kingdom Come as a medieval walking simulator, you're mostly free to do that. And number 18 is The Hunter Call of the Wild. Even though it's meant to be a hunting game primarily, it's also one of the best wilderness enjoyer games out there right now. It's got these huge swaths of wilderness just from all over the world, and no real dangers to worry about. You're the hunter, not the prey. You got a big old rifle. The wild is calling you, and you're there to shoot it. Most of the thrills in this game come from spotting game, tracking them, getting a clean shot, and that's not dangerous. I mean, unless you're an absolute moron with handling guns, but that's not something you're even allowed to do in The Hunter Call of the Wild. You're competent whether you like it or not, so yeah. It's not the best looking game at this point, but the wilderness maps are gigantic and realistically scaled. You can spend a ton of time walking without seeing much of anything, and if you're a true hardcore wilderness explorer, that's a feature, not a bug. And hey, if you don't want to hunt, you don't have to. There are photo missions to go on to just take pictures of landmarks and animals. So the whole hunting part of The Hunter, if that's not your thing, you can pretty much turn the game into a full-on nature documentary simulator instead. I, however, hear the call of the wild and fill the wild with bullets. And number 17 is Subnautica. There's two sides to Subnautica. The real chill surface zones where you start the game, and then there's the nerve-wracking deep oceans. The photogenic opening zones, they're perfect for undersea video game tourism. They're visually charming and mostly empty of dangerous fauna, but the fear of drowning or big open-world spaces can get to people, and if it does, there's not a lot of wilderness you'll be enjoying in Subnautica. It does have its own version of peaceful mode. You can explore and build without having to worry about violently being devoured by a giant alien kraken thing. So if you don't want to risk it all for the oceans, forests, things, whatever, you don't have to. Because you can easily drown in a pitch-black abyss or have your brain taken over by teleporting squids. The world of Subnautica is a dangerous one, but if you stick to the shallows, it's mostly just fun wilderness to explore. At number 16, it's Once Human. This online-only free-to-play survival game doesn't have a peaceful mode, but what it does have is some awesomely surreal visuals, some crazy anomalies, and a big open world that you're free to explore. It's got PvP elements, but if you're playing on a regular PvE server, it's all opt-in, so you don't have to worry about some other player coming in and torching your house while you're staring at the trees and reveling at the splendor of the natural world. You can still get stomped by anomalies, though. What works so well about the world of Once Human is it's both very mundane and very surreal. You can spend hours without seeing anything out of the ordinary if you want, or you can seek out the weirder parts of the world as well. Either way, you have a map that's fun to explore, and if you stick to the right places, it's mostly free of things that want to kill you. In terms of this list, that you can't just turn all that off is a point against the game's favor, at least as a nature walk video game, but it's a great looking game with a lot of really cool wilderness to check out. At number 15 is Horizon Forbidden West. Dense, lush, and varied, the open world is one of the sequel's greatest assets. They condense a huge chunk of land into a relatively small place. There's bits of California, Nevada, Washington, and a whole lot more stuffed into this relatively small map, which makes it feel much bigger than it actually is. Just the variety of locations is super impressive. You got dusty canyons, western prairies, deserts, entire jungles, snowy mountains, and coniferous forests. There's so much to see here, and it's all rendered in incredible detail. It's not pure wilderness, with the robots everywhere who want to kill you. So playing this game isn't exactly a nature hike. It pretty much is inevitable. You have to sneak around or kill something. But you're also not getting bombarded every 5 seconds like some other open world games out there. So there is time to just stop and reflect, find a nice viewpoint to take in the scenery. Some of the most impressive places in Forbidden West are where the ruins of civilization are overgrown by nature, and there's a whole lot of that here. My personal favorite location in the entire game is the Isle of Spires, the game's version of San Francisco. The towers are completely decimated husks and the streets have been taken over by life. It's less post-apocalyptic and more post-apocalyptic. There's a beautiful desolation in the way the nature's overtaken everything. These are the places Horizon really excels at. There's destruction and devastation everywhere, but instead of being gray and lifeless, this world is full of life in a really visually interesting way. And number 14 is Grounded. Now, Grounded isn't the best looking game, but its miniature world is so unique in comparison to most other survival games you're going to find. Yeah, they tend to be fantastical, but rarely do you get a game where regular suburban backyard stuff is your open world, where dungeons are anthills and garden rakes are towering edifices full of mystery. It's far from a regular backyard, honestly. It's probably the densest backyard I've ever seen, but there's a lot of room for exploration here, both guided and unguided. When you're not following the main quest, it can be a lot of fun to just stop and take a stroll through the leaf forest and see the world from a little bit of a new perspective. If you hate bugs and spiders and other crawly critters, then Grounded might be a little miserable for you, even with the arachnophobia settings turned on. But at least it's another game that can be made peaceful, so if beating on bugs isn't your thing, you can just explore, collect resources, and build the ultimate treehouse. And number 13 is Red Dead Redemption 2, like you knew this was going to be on this list. Now, I talked about the 2018 remake of Shadow of the Colossus being very pretty, but Red Dead Redemption 2, it's from the same year, and I mean, even though it's getting on in years, it's one of the most beautiful open worlds of all time. Almost every frame looks like it would be hanging on someone's wall today. Like, honestly, most stuff doesn't look as good as Red Dead Redemption 2, at least in most ways. It just renders the outdoors unlike the way any other game has. Rather than going for strict realism, it goes for kind of almost painterly quality to it in how it chooses to represent stuff. Everything feels custom built, carefully crafted by talented artists to, create something insane that doesn't really look insane in any way, but when you think about it, yeah. Like, they really put in the work to make this landscape feel real. And I don't mean like realistic, but real in a way that few games do. Geological features contort in ways you rarely see in video games. Rivers bend realistically. Forests feel dense and lived in. The variety of locations on the map is crazy, too, from the bayou to the snowy north. The game's mostly a Midwestern American setting, shows the many subtle ways the environment changes in the United States without relying on obvious visual signifiers. It's one of the few games I turn it on, and it's pretty much always like I'm seeing it for the first time, especially after playing the first Red Dead so recently. I popped on the second one, and it was like, wow, whoa. I mean, I'm still probably more likely to play the first one because it's not such a long game, and I don't know, the simple plot weirdly really works for a Western. And even in Red Dead 2, there's parts that haven't aged well, but the wilderness, it's top notch. At number 12 is The Long Dark. What The Long Dark lacks in graphical beauty or fidelity, it makes up for in design. It may not look that impressive, but no other game manages to capture the wild beauty of the most northern parts of North America. It's not one of those games where you're just looking around gawking at natural beauty, because it's not that flashy in the visuals department, but the way it depicts the cold is just the best out there. It's a game that gives you a cold chill thinking about it. Doesn't matter if you plop your butt right down at the equator in your underwear, giving a keen "you're welcome" to everybody who walks by, just trying to cool down because you're so damn hot. In more ways than one, am I right? I'm sorry, birds don't wear underwear. This is a long and unnecessary joke. But let's say that you're not a bird, and that's what you're doing. You will feel cold playing The Long Dark. Might be a little bit of a stretch. I might be exaggerating a little, but every time I think about it, I feel cold. Even if it's just for a second, I get that little, ew. They just did such a convincing job on the visual design and the feedback of this game. It's not one of those games you can build a comfy cabin and wait the world out. There's no permanent residences, and sitting inside all the time makes you go stir crazy. It doesn't really matter, though, because The Long Dark is much more of a survival game than it is a crafting game. Surviving is the top priority unless you're playing in peaceful mode. Then you can just wander around, take in the frozen north as much as you want. It's not going to blow anybody away with cutting-edge effects or anything, but it's, just an uncommon setting, and it's so convincing in its own way. It's massive, it's varied, getting around takes forever, so there's a lot of ground to cover, and it's just a unique experience. And number 11 is Ghost of Tsushima. If there's any other game that seems to encourage quiet reflection, it's this one. What makes Ghost stand out isn't because the world is realistic, because it ain't. It's not realistic at all. But everything just feels like it maximizes the natural beauty on display. It's certainly an idealized version of the real life island full of cascading waterfalls and atmospheric rainfall, and the leaves swirling majestically through the air, telling you which direction to go in. That's not how the real island works, but The weather, it feels like it's there to support you, right? It makes the most electrifying showdowns and the most placid and beautiful moments worth taking screenshots of, It's not a safe game at first by any means, but as you clear out the Mongol bases, the roads become more clear and getting around gets easier. There's no way you can entirely avoid combat because it is an open world action game, but once the island is mostly clear, then it stays that way and you're free to just take in the beauty of the landscapes. And number 10 is Green Hell, set in an unexplored part of the Amazon rainforest. Green Hell is literal hell. If you try to play it on the hardest difficulties, it's a survival game in the absolute truest sense. Everything wants to kill you, from wild animals to bacteria, and you can't just eat whatever and heal instantly. Taking damage can be devastating, and even doing something as basic as sleeping on the ground eventually gets you sick, and it can lead to an early death. For the hardcore nature lover, trying to survive can be fun, but if all you want to do is wander around the rainforest and do some sightseeing, this game does let you do it with a peaceful mode. The natives leave you alone, the wildlife doesn't hunt you, it's just a lot less stressful. With everything toned down, you can take the time to see the sights and explore its dense open world. It's one of the few games that is actually set in an Amazon rainforest and also does it well. It's a good game. At number 9 is No Man's Sky. For all the survival crafting games in this list so far, this is the first one, I think it might be the only one we talk about, with procedural generation. All the maps in every other game I've listed are static and never change, but with No Man's Sky, everything is always changing, and after years of updates, they've actually accomplished something with the randomly generated planets. It doesn't get quite as varied as Minecraft, but there's a ton of variation in the planets. The possibilities are basically endless. It's just Minecraft is a little bit more endless, that's all. The common problem with procedural generation is that after a while, Limitless starts to feel pretty limited because the seams start showing. But with No Man's Sky, that takes a real long time to get to. It does happen, but you really have to exhaust the game to get there. Each planet has its own atmosphere with its own randomly generated creatures and plants, its own hazards. There are mostly safe ones, there's highly dangerous and toxic ones, and you're free to move between them as much as you want. So if your wilderness experience is more about building a seaside cottage, and I mean, that's an option, but if you want to explore more dangerous parts of the universe, that's also an option. At number 8 is Assassin's Creed Origins. In most Assassin's Creed games, the cities are the real highlights, not all the stuff in between. But for me, the first game of the RPG trilogy is the one I'm probably most consistently impressed by. It comes down to the setting. The Egyptian landscape is just so unique for these open world games, and it's got these dunes, it's got palm trees, got lush wilderness, got deserts. I mean, it's honestly one of my favorite open worlds of all time. There's so many little impressive details, too, like how wandering through the desert for too long starts to trigger hallucinations. What's even better about it is that the first time they ever did a history tour mode was in this game. You can look around the world as much as you want. You don't have to worry about enemies or dying. The actual historical content's pretty surface level. It's mostly aimed at younger kids who haven't really had a detailed history class or anything yet. But there's still some interesting stuff here. For me, though, I just like climbing the nearest cliff and getting a bird's eye view of the entire kingdom. I mean, I don't have to climb in real life because I am a bird, but I get a bird's eye view of everything with my bird eyes, you know? Not in this game, though. Obviously, the whole kingdom is smaller than in real life, but you can't deny that view. And at number 7 is Hunt Showdown. Do you like spooky bogs and extremely dense, realistic forests? Well, Hunt's got that all in spades. What it doesn't have is an offline mode, outside the tutorial anyway. The rest of the game is strictly PvP, so if you want to go exploring this one, you better be ready to die suddenly from someone shooting at you from out of nowhere, or getting ambushed by a monster. There are monsters to deal with too, so a chill walk in the park game this is not. Still, it's got some of the most impressive wilderness seen in a game up to this point. It's really dense, really realistic. Not exactly pleasant to be in, not gonna lie. These aren't exactly the woods I would want to go through on a nature hike unless I wanted to get covered in leeches and poison ivy, but if you're looking for a more creepy autumn vibe for your nature game, Hunt's got it in spades. Death is swift and sudden even if you're playing the game normally, so good luck trying to enjoy the nature, but if you're prepared for it, then there are some really amazing looking sights to take in. A fantastic looking game, even with the post-processing that makes everything look unnecessarily spooky. And number 6 is Death Stranding. I hope you like trudging over oddly beautiful but desolate landscapes, because that's what Death Stranding is. There's a lot of strange game mechanics and frankly insane cutscenes, but the real meat of the game is a lot more chill and slow-paced. There's an occasional deadly ghost monster area you have to sneak through, but most of the game is about the simple act of transporting stuff from one location to another. Few games put the environment front and center like this one, because getting around isn't simple. You actually have to think about where you're going and what you're doing, deploying ladders and ropes and zip lines. It's all needed to facilitate your journey through the wasteland. It's all beautiful as hell, too. There's so many times where I'm just tempted to stop and take in the atmosphere, and those are the moments where Death Stranding is working its best. At number 5 is Xenoblade Chronicles X. With this game breaking free of the shackles of the Wii U, I figured now is a good time to highlight the game's breathtaking open world. It's definitely showing its age, but the world they created here is just second to none. And unlike every other Xenoblade game, it's truly open world. It's entirely seamless, no loading screens between major zones. Beautiful stuff. The starting zone of Primordia is where you're going to be spending most of your time. It's a real sight to behold. It's got massive waterfalls, impossibly giant rock formations, and enormous monsters just chilling in the distance. It's massive, it's alien, and it's awe-inspiring, even with the game's lower resolution. What's unusual about this game is that the story really isn't the focus. It's a lot more about exploration. Main story missions come and go, but the majority of your time in the game is spent doing side quests and setting up bases in these wild regions. The actual story also isn't much to write home about, but these amazing environment designs are best in class. The music is too, and it really sells this natural world. It's a place that's easy to get lost in.
Let's see what you've got. Shadow Strike, Lightning! Slide Hammer! Move in and do some damage.
At number 4 is Microsoft Flight Simulator. No other game lets you explore the splendor of the natural world like this one, because it's literally the real world. At least, it's scans of the real world ported into the simulation. You can't actually touch anything, you only ever see it from the sky, but no other game captures the natural world as well as this does. It's easy to forget how massive our real world is at times, and the game is the perfect way to remind yourself, because you can literally just fly for hours and not see a hint of human civilization if you want to. You can fly through canyons, around massive mountains, you can see some of the many wonders of the natural world from your computer desk. It's never as good as the real thing, but hey, you want to chill out and relax on your PC? You probably can't do a lot better than Flight Simulator. It's mostly thought of as a thing to see cities and towns, but depending on the location, it's great for nature tourism too. And number 3 is Icarus. This unusual sci-fi survival game can be a strange experience, because when you're in the middle of the game, it'll feel like any other survival game. It's only when you're back at your spaceship between missions, or getting a dropship full of gear, that it actually starts feeling sci-fi. There's no aliens, and the environment is just like Earth. Looks very good, but there's not really anything sci-fi about it. The main reason I'm putting this one on the list is, there's not really anything that stands out about it, and some of the systems are honestly kind of annoying. But it's a game that looks so good and has such solid survival fundamentals at its core. It's a great game for the times when you just want to go out into the wilderness, cut some wood, and do some hardcore surviving. At number 2 is Eastshade, a game about nature, but paradoxically not a survival game, more of an RPG-ish, kind of, I guess. But instead of fighting monsters, you're painting pictures. There's a town, villagers who need your help, a story to play through, and the goal of Eastshade, above anything else, is to wander around this charming island and find picture-perfect spots to paint. It's a game that is literally all about exploring and enjoying the wilderness. Your main goal is to sit back and quietly immortalize the natural world. For some people, probably sounds like the most boring thing ever, but I know a lot of people who absolutely love this game. It's a unique game. It's not exactly a thrill-a-minute experience, but it's going for something very different, and for that, it does actually very well. And finally, at number 1, the most hardcore of survival games, Unreal World. Now, I'm going to say there's not a lot here for folks who don't want a game that punches you in the back of the head and kicks you in the groin for good measure. It's not a pretty game. Honestly, it's ugly, and the UI design is a mess, but its survival credentials can't be beat. It's one of the oldest and best games out there. You just have to get through a lot of confusion for it to click. Now, it does stick out because I'm talking about a game that isn't necessarily for folks who are interested in looking at the wilderness. This game is for people who are more interested in getting a somewhat authentic experience of survival in the wilderness. Nothing comes easily, and little mistakes can be super disastrous if they happen at the wrong times, but it never stops being kind of an eyesore to look at. But if you're a Survivor Man style nature enjoyer, it's the pure nature experience on PC. Most of these games are all about seeing nature. This is about experiencing nature. And nature's kind of ugly when you're actually just, dealing with it unequipped. But that's all I've got for you today. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week. Best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription, so click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications. And as always, I thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconHero. We'll see you next time right here on gameranx.